Tonight, beneath the stone floor of St. Edric's, two archaeologists lean over a queen's tomb, sealed for centuries. Lantern light touches dark blue burial cloth, a tarnished crown-like band, and a small reliquary no surviving record says should be there. Then a brush clears the dust beside Queen Adelina's hand and reveals an ordinary object carrying a forgotten woman's memory. Before we follow that clue, gently tap like "Subscribe to Medieval Night Stories" and tell me where in the world you are listening from tonight. Now settle in. Let your breathing slow and allow the cold abbey air to gather quietly around you. The crown-like band in the lamplight is not the solid royal crown imagined by later storytellers. It is a fragile copper-gilt circlet, narrow enough to have rested upon a burial veil and too modest to appear in the inventories of royal treasure. Nearby, the small reliquary is green with age. The blue cloth is mostly shadow, mineral staining, and surviving threads that once belonged to a darker textile. Nothing is quite as theatrical as it first appears, yet the humble truth will prove far stranger than the legend. To understand why these objects are here and why another grave waits behind the Queen's wall, you must leave the careful lamps of the excavation and travel backward through stone dust and memory. You find yourself standing ankle-deep in the winter mud of a narrow, medieval road with cold stone walls rising through river mist ahead of you and the dark shape of an abbey crouching beyond them. Damp straw clings to your boots. Smoke hangs beneath the gatehouse rafters. Somewhere behind the walls a bell sounds slowly through the evening air, while horses breathe pale clouds beside a guttering torch. Your cloak smells of wet wool. Your fingers have gone stiff with cold, and medieval travel brochures have once again oversold the experience. The truth is, you probably would not last a week out here without developing either a cough, a grievance about turnips, or an unusually intense devotion to warm socks. The gate does not open immediately. Nothing important seems to happen immediately in this part of the world, especially when the person responsible for making it happen is wrapped in 3 layers of wool and standing beside a brazier. You wait beneath the timbered arch while drizzle becomes a fine, needling sleet. Above you, the abbey wall is dark, with damp its stones patched in places where generations of masons have repaired frost damage with whatever could be carried up from the river quarry. Moss fills the lower joints. Rainwater trickles from carved mouths set beneath the parapet, and one grotesque stone face appears to be vomiting directly onto a pile of firewood. It is, you reflect, a remarkably medieval method of drainage. Behind the gate chains shift. A small viewing hatch opens. One grey eye examines you. You explain that you have come with the household of Lord Everard, whose carts are following somewhere behind on the road, though judging by the condition of that road they may presently be resting sideways in a ditch. The eye disappears. There is another pause. Then the gate groans inward. You duck beneath an oak beam polished smooth by centuries of hands and shoulders, and at once the world changes. Outside the walls there is only wind, wet earth, bare hedges, and the fading road. Inside there is life. Not lively life exactly. The abbey is in mourning, but everywhere there is movement. A lay brother carries a wicker basket of onions across the inner yard. Two servants roll a barrel beneath a covered passage. A boy in an oversized wool hood leads a tired mule toward the stable. Near the kitchens, a woman shakes rain from a bundle of dried rosemary before disappearing through a doorway glowing with firelight. The smell reaches you a moment later. Wood smoke, boiled cabbage, wet horse, hot fat, wax. And beneath all of it faint, but unmistakable, the heavy sweetness of incense. The abbey bell sounds again, one slow note, then another. You stand still and listen. The Queen is dead. You have known this since yesterday morning, when the message reaches the manor where you have been staying. A rider comes before dawn with mud to his knees and frost in his beard. He carries no royal banner, only a sealed letter tucked beneath his cloak, and within an hour every person in the hall seems to know that Queen Adelina has died at the Abbey of St. Edric. Yet here, standing within the walls where her body still lies, the news feels different, less like a message, more like weather. It hangs over everything. The servants speak quietly. The bells are slow. Doors are closed gently instead of slammed. Even the dogs seem subdued, though one shaggy brown creature near the kitchen clearly has not received the official instruction and is attempting to steal something from a basket. A cook notices. The dog loses the argument. You move deeper into the yard. By evening, the guest house fire is low and the rumours are multiplying. Some say Adelina refused a royal vault. Others whisper of a sealed chest carried toward the sacristy. Beneath all the contradictions, one idea remains. She chose a burial far simpler and more private than her court expected. You sleep beside the hearth while the slow bells measure the night. By morning the rain has thinned to a silver mist, and the abbey seems to wake reluctantly beneath it. You rise from the guest house bench with the uncomfortable discovery that a wool blanket can be both heavy and somehow incapable of keeping your feet warm. The half-burned candle beside the hearth has guttered into a pool of wax. Someone has stirred the ashes back to life, and the brown kitchen dog is asleep dangerously close to the fire, occupying the warmest patch of floor with the confidence of a minor lord. Outside, the first bell has already sounded. You follow a servant across the cloister toward the royal apartments where Queen Adelina spent her final weeks. The rooms are not grand in the way you might expect. They occupy part of the old infirmary range where thick walls hold warmth better than the draughty ceremonial chambers of the Abbey guest palace. An iron key turns in an oak door and you step inside. The Queen's presence remains everywhere. A fur-lined cloak hangs from a peg. A pair of soft leather shoes rests beneath a stool. On a table sit 3 beeswax candles, one burned almost to the holder beside a silver cup and a small wooden box filled with dried herbs. The room smells of smoke, rosemary, damp wool, and something sharper, vinegar perhaps. Servants sometimes sprinkle vinegar around sick rooms, believing it cleans corrupted air. Medieval medicine often treats illness as a disturbance in the balance of the body, while ordinary households add their own remedies, charms, prayers, and inherited habits. No one can quite agree whether Queen Adelina trusted physicians more than saints. Judging from the room, she seems unwilling to choose. Beside her bed hangs a small reliquary containing what is said to be a fragment of St. Edric's cloak. On the table lies a physician's jar of dried horehound for coughing. A strip of red wool is tied around the bedpost, supposedly to protect against fever. A servant notices you looking. Her nurse tied that. Did it help? The woman gives you the sort of expression usually reserved for questions asked before breakfast. She liked it there, that is all. The Queen's bed is narrow, curtained in faded green cloth. Beneath the linen mattress lies a thicker pallet stuffed with wool and straw. A warming pan still leans against the wall, its brass lid blackened from use. You imagine servants filling it with hot embers before sliding it beneath the blankets. A good idea in theory, less comforting when you remember that bedding embers and medieval fire safety are not famous for harmonious cooperation. An older chamber woman named Agnes begins folding clothing into a chest. She has served the Queen for 23 years. Her hands move slowly. She rose before prime most mornings, Agnes tells you, even in winter, especially in winter. The Queen apparently disliked lying awake in darkness. Before dawn, servants would bring a candle, warm ale, and a basin of water. Then came prayer, dressing correspondence, and sometimes a short walk beneath the cloister, if the weather allowed. Royal privacy was limited. A queen might sleep behind curtains, but chamberwomen, confessors, physicians, ladies, clerks, guards, messengers, and household officers continually moved near her rooms. Even washing could become a small ceremony. A basin is brought, water is warmed, linen cloths are counted, jewellery is removed and recorded, hair is combed beneath watching eyes. You begin to understand that being royal means having better blankets and almost no chance to lose anything unnoticed. In the adjoining audience chamber, a clerk sorts ordinary royal business and carefully avoids the gaps where Adelina's private burial instructions should be. Then Agnes returns with the Queen's most familiar possession. Agnes enters carrying a small wooden prayer book. Its binding is worn smooth. This was always beside her. You open it carefully. The pages contain prayers, saints' days, and handwritten notes added over many years. Near the back, one line has been marked repeatedly with a thumbnail, a prayer for humility at death. You say nothing. Agnes takes the book back. During her final days, she tells you the Queen refuses rich food. She asks instead for thin pottage, coarse bread softened in broth, and once strangely smoked fish from the monk's kitchen. Her attendants protest. The physician protests louder. The Queen eats the fish anyway. It may be the most royal thing you have heard about her. She also begins dismissing unnecessary servants. Jewels are inventoried, gowns are distributed, coins are sent to the poor. A fur cloak goes to an elderly widow who has served in the laundry since before the Queen's marriage. Then 3 nights before her death, she asks for the abbot. They speak behind closed doors. Afterward, an iron-bound chest is carried from her chamber. You remember seeing such a chest last night. Agnes lowers her voice. Those who tell the tale never fully agree about what she put inside. What do you think? Agnes looks towards the empty bed. For a moment the chamber is very quiet. Then she says things she did not want the court to see. A cold draught slips beneath the door. The candle flame bends. From somewhere deeper in the abbey comes the soft scrape of a key turning in a lock, and you begin to suspect that the Queen's final winter was not merely a season of illness, it was a season of preparation. Agnes lifts the lid. Inside lies a folded length of dark blue cloth. The colour is uneven, almost black, where the fabric overlaps and softer at the worn edges. Blue cloth of good quality can be expensive, especially when its dye must be prepared carefully and applied more than once. Yet this is not a glittering court mantle. It is wool tightly woven, warm and plain. You can see several repairs made with thread of a slightly different shade. Her travelling veil, Agnes says. The Queen wore it on journeys to shrines, hospitals and estates where ceremony mattered less than weather. Rain has marked one corner. Candle wax has stiffened another. A neat darn near the hem shows where the fabric once tore on a saddle fitting. Agnes runs one finger across that repair. She asked to be wrapped in it, not dressed in cloth of gold, not covered by a new silk pall bearing heraldic beasts, wrapped in a weathered blue veil that has already crossed muddy roads with her. Beneath the cloth rests a narrow metal band. For a moment you think it is a crown. It has the shape of one, at least a slender circlet with 4 small leaf-shaped points. But it is made from copper washed with a thin layer of gilding, and parts of the gold have already rubbed away. There are no jewels. Tiny holes along the inner edge suggest it may be stitched to a veil rather than worn as a heavy piece of regalia. A burial crown, you ask? Agnes looks uncomfortable with the word. Funerary crowns, circlets and head ornaments vary greatly across medieval Europe. Some royal graves contain magnificent regalia. Others contain symbolic substitutes made for ceremony, and many contain nothing of the kind at all. Customs change by region, dynasty, date, religious community, and the wishes of the dead. A crown-shaped object does not always mean a reigning crown, just as a painted sword does not always mean a weapon was placed in the coffin. This band was made by a local metalworker only days ago. The Queen, Agnes explains, did not want her state crown buried. That belongs to the realm, not to her. Yet the household insists that some visible sign of rank must appear when the body lies in the chapel. The compromise is this modest circlet. A queen's final argument reduced to a narrow band of gilded copper. Beneath the veil lies one more object, a roll of undyed linen. Agnes loosens the cord just enough to reveal scraps of plain cloth-coloured thread and a polished bone sewing needle. They are not treasure, only the quiet tools of women's work. Adelina had asked about an older woman once, buried at St. Edric's, a woman whose name no surviving list preserved. Agnes will not say whether the bundle belonged to her or merely stood for a life the chronicles ignored. Agnes returns the bundle to the chest and lowers the lid. The lock closes with a soft click. For an instant, the three objects remain clear in your mind: the dark blue veil, the copper-gilt circlet, and the plain linen roll. Centuries from now, when archaeologists uncover mineral-darkened threads and a narrow band of green metal beside Adelina's skull, an artist will imagine a brighter scene. The blue will become richer. The metal will shine like a crown. The dim burial chamber will fill with golden light. The truth is quieter. It is also more human. His name is Master Odo. You find him beside a narrow window grinding something in a stone mortar. He is thin, grey-bearded, and wrapped in a dark wool robe stained at the cuffs with ink oil and substances you decide not to investigate too closely before breakfast. Shelves behind him hold jars of dried sage, fennel, horehound, mustard seed, and powdered roots. Bundles of herbs hang from beams overhead. A brass basin sits beside a small knife. You try not to stare at the knife. Master Odo notices anyway, for bloodletting, of course it is. Nothing brightens a winter morning quite like discovering the local physician has introduced himself. By explaining his knife collection, he gives you a tired look. You expected something larger, good. He returns to his mortar. Medicine in this world is built around old authorities, practical observation, religious belief, and an impressive willingness to consider unpleasant liquids medicinal. Master Odo believes the body contains 4 humours: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Health depends upon balance. Winter is cold and wet. Old age is often considered cold and dry. Food, sleep, weather, temperament, and even the movement of the heavens may influence what happens inside the body. The Queen's illness, he tells you, begins with exhaustion. Then comes a cough, then fever, then weakness. Nothing extraordinary, except that she does not recover. Odo describes herbs, honey broth, and one unsuccessful bleeding. None explains why the Queen briefly improved and then weakened again. On her final evening, however, her attention turned away from illness and toward what the earth might preserve. On the final evening, Queen Adelina dismisses everyone except Agnes the abbot and Master Odo. She asks Odo directly how long she has. He refuses to answer precisely. Physicians know better than to promise the behaviour of death. She understood anyway. Then she asks a stranger question, not whether she will suffer, not whether she will live until morning. She asks how long the body remains recognizable after burial. You feel the warmth of the infirmary suddenly thin. What did you tell her? The truth. Which truth, you wonder, because medieval people know that decomposition depends upon weather, burial place, wrapping, coffin, soil, and 100 things no physician can measure neatly. But Odo explains what he can. The Queen listens. Then she asks whether objects buried beside a body may survive longer than cloth. Metal, certainly. Bone, perhaps. Wood, depending upon damp. After that, she says nothing. The abbot leaves carrying a folded parchment. Agnes begins to weep, and the Queen asks Odo to burn one small packet of medicine in the hearth. What was inside? He looks directly at you. I do not know. You prepared it. No. Then who did? That he says quietly is what troubles me. At Adelina's command, Odo burns the unmarked packet and casts its bitter-sweet ashes into the running stream. He never learns who prepared it. When you ask what truly troubled him, he looks towards the church, not the manner of her death, but everything she arranged for afterward. You follow Agnes into the church. Incense hangs beneath the stone vaulting. The nave is colder than the guest house, and every breath forms faintly before you. Beeswax candles burn in rows around the inner chapel, their steady yellow flames brighter and cleaner than common tallow. The Queen lies beyond a screen. Only a small group is permitted inside. You enter with them quietly. There is nothing theatrical about the room, no glittering throne, no state crown, no jewels. The woman who ruled beside a king now lies upon a wooden bier beneath a white linen sheet. Death has reduced the royal household to whispers, warm water, folded cloth, and practical work. 2 chamber women prepare a basin. Water has been heated over charcoal and mixed with rosemary. Agnes says the scent is one the Queen always liked. Whether rosemary is used for cleansing, remembrance, protection, or simply because it smells better than a winter sick room, no one can quite agree. Perhaps it is all 4. The women wash the Queen carefully. You remain at a respectful distance, watching servants pass fresh cloths, combs, and small bowls. Her hair is combed and arranged, her hands are cleaned, the nails are trimmed, the body is wrapped and dressed in a linen shift before a darker gown is placed over it. The ceremonial mantle is refused. Adelina's worn prayer book and a cheap pilgrim badge are placed beside her instead. Through the afternoon, candles surround the bier, while monks, servants, and villagers keep vigil in the cold church. Shortly before the final office of the night, Agnes brings the abbot a sealed parchment. Then, shortly before Compline, you notice Agnes speaking urgently with the abbot. He listens. His expression changes. A servant is sent away. He returns carrying a folded parchment, sealed with dark wax. The Queen's final burial instructions. The master of the household approaches. The seal is broken. Everyone nearby becomes very interested in looking uninterested. The abbot reads silently. His eyes move once across the page. Then again. What does it say? The master asks. The abbot folds the parchment. For several seconds only the candles move. At last he answers. Her Grace does not wish to be taken back to the royal city. The master stares. She is to be buried here. Yes. In St. Edric's, the abbot looks towards the stone floor beneath the chapel. Before dawn, preparations will begin. Outside, another bell sounds over the frozen fields. And suddenly the quiet abbey is no longer merely the place where a queen has died. It is the place where she has chosen to remain. Before dawn, the abbey yard fills with the smell of freshly cut oak. You wake to the rasp of a saw somewhere beyond the guest-house wall, followed by the dull knock of a wooden mallet. For a few comfortable moments you lie beneath your wool blanket and imagine remaining exactly where you are. Then the bell for matins sounds. The brown kitchen dog lifts his head from the hearth. You both reconsider life. By the time you step outside, a faint blue light lies over the cloister roofs. Frost silver coats the edges of the courtyard, and the mud has hardened into ridges beneath your boots. Near the workshops, 2 carpenters are already working beneath a covered shed. Between them lies the beginning of Queen Adelina's coffin. You stop. It is plain, remarkably plain. The boards are thick oak, carefully joined, but there is no gilding, no carved royal arms, no painted saints, no velvet covering, and no elaborate metalwork, only dark wood. An elderly carpenter runs his hand along one plank, checking for roughness. Beside him, his apprentice heats animal glue over a tiny charcoal brazier. A royal officer watches with an expression suggesting he has just discovered someone intends to serve turnips at a coronation. This cannot be right. The carpenter does not stop working. The measurements are right. I mean the coffin. So do I. The officer gestures at the bare boards. She is a queen. The carpenter glances at him. So I was told. You look away to hide a smile. Royal dignity has encountered a craftsman before breakfast, and dignity is losing. The abbot arrives carrying the folded parchment from last night. Queen Adelina's instructions are read again. A coffin of good oak, no gold covering, no jewelled fittings, no crown upon the lid, no royal effigy. The Queen apparently asks that nothing unnecessary separate her body from the earth. The officer is horrified. The abbot is calm. The carpenter looks pleased that the argument has confirmed he does not need to carve anything complicated. No one can quite agree whether the Queen's simplicity comes from religious humility, personal preference, fear for her soul, or distrust of what might happen to a wealthy tomb after death. Rich graves attract attention. That is true in almost any century. A jewelled coffin is, among other things, an invitation written in gold. You watch the carpenters fit the sideboards. Iron nails are used sparingly. Wooden pegs secure several joints. The interior will be lined with linen but not silk. Even that creates another dispute. The household master wants crimson cloth. Agnes produces another instruction. Plain linen. The household master closes his eyes. You suspect Queen Adelina has discovered a remarkably effective way to continue winning arguments after death. By pale morning the plain linen lining is finished, and the copper-gilt circlet is stitched lightly to the weathered blue veil. It is a sign of rank, not a treasury crown. The completed coffin waits without gold jewels or an effigy. Meanwhile, Adelina's sealed chest is placed under the abbot's authority unopened, exactly as she ordered. The coffin leaves St. Edric's beneath a sky the colour of old pewter. Not for the royal city, not yet for the grave. Queen Adelina's instructions require one final procession around the lands nearest the abbey, passing several villages, a roadside chapel she once endowed, and a small manor where she spent part of her youth. No one seems entirely certain why she asked for this slow circuit before burial. Some say it is an act of humility. Others say she wishes ordinary people to pray for her. One elderly monk insists the route follows an older pilgrim road. No one can quite agree whether the Queen chose the road for memory devotion or some reason she never explained. You walk beside the procession as the abbey gates open. Snow has fallen lightly during the night. It does not cover the road so much as decorate the mud. Every cartwheel cuts a brown channel through the white. The Queen's plain oak coffin rests on a wagon draped in dark wool. 4 horses pull it, their breath rising in clouds. No golden canopy stands above the bier. No jewel-covered effigy lies upon the lid. Only a wooden cross. Agnes walks behind it in a fur-lined cloak. Master Odo follows farther back. The household master looks as though each mile of simplicity causes him personal pain. The brown kitchen dog trots beside you. No one invited him. No one has successfully dismissed him either. The first village lies beyond a frozen meadow. Before you reach it, the abbey bells fade behind you, replaced by the creak of harness leather and the slow squelch of boots. Travel in winter means watching the ground constantly. A puddle may be shallow. It may also contain enough mud to remove a shoe and keep it permanently. You discover this when the man ahead of you loses one boot and spends several dignified moments hopping beside a dead queen's funeral procession. Even grief must occasionally make room for footwear. At the first village, farmers and weavers kneel beside a stone cross and leave bread for the abbey poor. Farther on, sleet drives the procession beneath a roadside shrine, hung with humble pilgrim badges. There, beside a small fire, the Queen's last collection begins to grow. Pilgrims leave such objects after seeking healing or protection. Some are cheap lead-tin souvenirs bought outside famous shrines. Others become deeply personal reminders of journeys made on bleeding feet. A merchant travelling south has built a small fire nearby. He shares smoked fish and bread with 2 pilgrims. You warm your hands beside them. The fish is salty enough to preserve both itself and possibly the road. One pilgrim carries a staff marked with notches. The other wears a shell badge on his hat. They ask who lies in the coffin. When told it is the Queen, the older pilgrim crosses himself. Which Queen? The household master looks offended from 20 paces away. You explain. The pilgrim nods. Royal fame, you discover, weakens surprisingly quickly outside royal halls. Before leaving, one pilgrim takes a tiny bronze ring from his pouch. He asks Agnes whether it may be placed among the offerings carried beside the coffin. She examines it. The ring bears no stone, only a scratched cross. Why she gave alms at St. Walburga's hospice when my wife was ill. Agnes accepts it. The ring joins several objects already gathered in a wooden tray carried by a servant. You notice them for the first time. A carved wooden bead, a small iron key, 2 pilgrim badges, a strip of embroidered cloth, a tiny clay flask. None are valuable. More villages add a spindle whorl, a horseshoe nail, and candle wax. Even a toll-keeper insists that the funeral wagon pay by the axle. Beyond the bridge, darkness gathers and torches are lit. Torches are lit. Orange light moves across tree trunks and wet snow. The Queen's coffin becomes a dark shape between flickering flames. You hear owls somewhere beyond the road. The dog stays unusually close. At another shrine, people have placed bowls containing burning charcoal. Travellers warm their hands there while reciting prayers. One old man steps from the shadows holding a small cloth parcel. He asks to approach the wagon. A guard refuses. Agnes intervenes. The old man unwraps the cloth. Inside lies a broken piece of blue glass. Nothing more. He says the Queen once visited his village after a flood. His daughter gave her a blue glass bead. The Queen accepted it. Years later, the old man found this fragment among his daughter's belongings after she died. He wants it carried beside Adelina now. Agnes takes the glass. You watch her place it among the other strange, humble offerings. The wooden bead, the iron key, the nail, the pilgrim badges, the wax, the spindle whorl, the little clay flask. Objects no chronicler would bother recording, objects no king would display. Yet the collection is growing, and as the procession winds through the forest by torchlight, you begin to understand something the royal officers have not. The route passes the modest manor where Adelina spent part of her youth, then a roadside hospice supported by her alms. Prayers drift through narrow doors while the coffin waits outside in the sleet. No precious object is offered, only memory, shelter, and a pot of hot onion broth for the travellers. By the final miles, the covered tray beside the coffin is crowded with ordinary things. The bronze ring, the strip of embroidery, the spindle whorl, the horseshoe nail, the blue glass, the river stone, the old iron key. Some may never reach the coffin. Some will be returned, reused, or stored. Some will disappear in the confusion after burial. But a few will pass beneath the chapel floor with Adelina, and centuries later they will confuse people who expect a queen to be surrounded only by objects that glitter. The last stop before St. Edric's is a roadside hospice, supported partly by the Queen's alms. Its hall smells of broth, wet straw, and wood smoke. Travellers sleep on pallets along the walls. A feverish child rests near the hearth, while her mother cups warm water between both hands. The keeper cannot bring the sick outside, so the coffin pauses beneath the window. A prayer is spoken from within. No one offers an object. Instead, the keeper gives the funeral party a pot of hot onion broth. You drink it standing in the road. It is thin, smoky, and wonderful. The household master drinks 2 bowls and then remembers he disapproves of simplicity. When the wagon moves again, the people at the hospice watch from the doorway. The Queen passes them without fanfare, just as winter wind passes through the bare trees. Ahead, the abbey bell begins to sound. One note reaches you across the dark fields. Then another. St. Edric's is calling the procession home. The objects beneath their covering knock softly together as the wheels cross frozen ruts. It is a small sound, metal against wood, glass against stone. The beginning of an archaeological puzzle no one on this road can imagine. Not gold, not jewels, memory. By the time the distant abbey bells begin sounding through the darkness, the tray beside the coffin is nearly full, and among all those humble gifts one object waits that no one can explain. A small iron key, black with age, its shape oddly similar to the key you saw hanging from the belt of the broad-shouldered monk at St. Edric's. The old iron key troubles you all the way back to St. Edric's. By the time the abbey tower rises through mist, night has swallowed the fields. Torches flare beside the gate. Monks wait beneath the arch while the funeral wagon rolls slowly inside. Mud sucks at your boots, horses stamp in the cold, and the brown dog trots ahead as though he personally arranged the procession and is pleased everyone has returned according to schedule. The abbey bells begin. Their sound settles over the courtyard. Agnes walks beside the wagon while servants lift the tray of offerings. The iron key shifts against the wooden bead, a small metallic click. The broad-shouldered monk hears it. You know he hears it, because his head turns sharply. For the first time since meeting him, his calm expression disappears. Only for a moment, then it returns. He crosses the yard. Where did that come from? Agnes looks down at the tray, a roadside offering. From whom? An old man. The monk reaches towards the key, then stops before touching it. You notice his own key hanging beneath his wool cloak, same long stem, same rectangular bow, but not identical. They might be companions, 2 keys made for neighbouring locks. Agnes notices too. What does yours open? The monk pulls his cloak closed. A door. This is technically an answer. It is also the sort of answer designed to make everyone more curious. The Queen's coffin is carried into the church while the offerings are taken toward the sacristy. You follow the procession through incense and candlelight, but your attention remains on the monk. When Aldwin disappears beneath a narrow arch near the choir, you follow him down worn steps. Behind an iron-bound door, he finally explains why the second key disturbed him. His name, he finally tells you, is Brother Aldwin. He serves as cellarer for part of the abbey household, though his responsibilities extend to several older chambers beneath the church. The door before you does not lead to food stores. It leads to an earlier crypt. older than the current choir, older perhaps than the oldest surviving part of St. Edric's. What is buried there? Monks. Only monks, he hesitates. That is answer enough. Brother Aldwin removes the key from the lock. Long ago, he explains, before the abbey church was enlarged, respected abbots and wealthy patrons were buried beneath this part of the building. Later reconstruction sealed several passages. Some graves were moved, others remained where they were. The chamber beyond this door has been closed for decades. Then why do you carry the key? Because closed doors still require guarding. A short distance ahead, another door waits. Smaller, older. There is no visible lock. Instead, a narrow iron plate is set into the stone beside it. Brother Aldwin holds his key against the plate. It does not fit. The key from the road, you whisper. Perhaps. What is behind this? He does not answer immediately. No one can quite agree whether the chamber was originally a treasury, a burial room, or a private chapel. Abbey records from the period are incomplete. A fire generations ago destroyed several charters and inventories, but there is one old story. A queen was once meant to be buried beneath St. Edric's, not Adelina, another queen, nearly 2 centuries earlier. She died unexpectedly while travelling through the region. Her body was prepared here, but the king ordered it returned to the capital. According to official records, the crypt prepared for her remained empty. Official records, Brother Aldwin gives you a tired look. You are learning. Some monks later claimed something was placed inside before the chamber was sealed. No one knows what. A reliquary, documents, royal valuables, perhaps nothing at all. Those who tell the tale never fully agree. You think again of Queen Adelina's sealed chest, of the missing jewels, of her strange questions to Master Odo about what survives underground. Did the Queen know about this chamber? Brother Aldwin's face tightens. She asked about it when, 3 weeks ago, cold seems to travel through the passage. What did you tell her? The truth, that it was sealed. Did she ask for it opened? No. That surprises you. She asked who possessed the key, and I told her no key survived. You stare at him. Above you, muffled through stone, the funeral bell sounds. Brother Aldwin looks toward the ceiling, then toward the passage where the Queen's humble offerings have been carried. The old man on the road, he says, did he give a name? You shake your head. He closes his eyes briefly. When he opens them, there is unease there. Not fear, exactly. Recognition. You ask what he believes the second key opens. He walks back toward the stairs without answering. At the top, candlelight spills into the passage. Before climbing, he stops. If that key fits this door, it has been missing for more than 100 years. The bell sounds again, and if it fits, Brother Aldwin looks towards the ancient darkness behind you. Then Queen Adelina may have known exactly where she wished her secrets to remain. Later, beside the guest house fire, Agnes confirms that Adelina had spent the previous winter reading damaged memorial lists rather than royal chronicles. What she sought was not treasure, but the identity of a woman erased from remembrance. She explains that Queen Adelina spent part of the previous winter examining old abbey records. Not royal chronicles filled with battles and marriages, but estate rolls, memorial lists, burial accounts, and damaged inventories. She asks particularly about women buried at St. Edric's, widows, benefactors, noble women, and one unnamed royal burial mentioned only indirectly in a damaged entry. You think of Brother Aldwin's story, the earlier queen who was supposedly never buried here. Did she find the name? Agnes shakes her head. The page was torn. Did she think someone was inside the sealed chamber? She thought someone had been forgotten. The fire snaps. Outside the wind moves around the shutters. You ask whether Adelina wished the chamber opened. Agnes looks at you sharply. You have been speaking to Brother Aldwin. No point denying it. She never asked to open it, Agnes says. Then why search for it? Agnes puts down her spoon. Because she said a grave without a name is a second death. The sentence follows you into a restless night. Long before dawn, the burial bell sounds through the shutters, and Aldwin waits beside the dying hearth with a candle in his hand. The guest house is almost dark. Only embers remain in the hearth, glowing beneath grey ash. Someone has left the half-burned beeswax candle on the table, and Brother Aldwin lights it before leading you into the courtyard. Frost has returned. It whitens the roofs and turns every puddle into a thin sheet of cloudy ice. Your boots break the surface as you cross towards the church. Horse breath drifts from the stable. Smoke hangs beneath the eaves. Far beyond the walls, the world is still black. Inside St. Edric's, dozens of candles burn. Their light rests upon pillars, painted saints' brass vessels, and the pale stone floor. The Queen's coffin waits in the inner chapel. Plain oak, no cloth of gold, no carved effigy, no state crown. The simplicity still feels strange. A queen is supposed to leave the world, surrounded by symbols explaining exactly who she was. Adelina seems determined to leave fewer instructions for the eye. Monks gather in the choir. The chanting begins. You follow the funeral household toward the chapel while incense drifts through the cold air. The coffin lid remains open. For the last time you see the Queen as her attendants prepared her. Dark gown, white linen, the weathered blue veil frames her head. Stitched lightly to it is the narrow copper-gilt circlet, a symbol of rank, but not the jewelled crown of the realm. Hands folded, the wooden cross between them. Her worn prayer book rests near one arm. Beside it lies the little pilgrim badge Agnes showed you. Agnes enters carrying a small cloth bundle. For a moment you wonder whether the missing jewels have finally returned. She opens the cloth. Inside lies a wooden comb. Its teeth are worn. One is missing. That was hers, you ask? For many years. The household master nearly protests again, then seems too tired. The comb is placed beside the prayer book. You stare at the objects, a prayer book, a cheap pilgrim badge, a wooden cross, a worn comb. These are not the belongings anyone would expect archaeologists or grave robbers or ambitious descendants to find in a royal tomb. They are the possessions of someone who has deliberately chosen familiarity over magnificence. No one can quite agree whether simple grave goods are meant to express humility, spiritual anxiety, personal attachment, or distrust of earthly wealth. Sometimes the explanation may be all of these at once. Before the coffin closes, Agnes adds one final thing. A tiny linen pouch. You recognize the shape, not the medicinal charm from the sick room, something smaller. What is inside you? Whisper. She hesitates. Hair. Whose? She does not answer immediately. Then softly, her daughter's. You had heard that Adelina lost a child many years ago. The girl lived only into early adulthood and was buried far from St. Edric's. A lock of hair remained with the Queen, perhaps for decades. There is no official record of it, no royal inventory. The coffin lid is lowered and secured. Oak meets oak softly beneath the church vault, and the last familiar object disappears into darkness. The burial party moves towards the opening prepared beneath the chapel floor. Several paving stones have been lifted. Below them, narrow steps descend into a newly cleared chamber. You carry a candle as you follow. The air becomes colder with every step. The grave is not the ancient sealed chamber Brother Aldwin showed you. This one lies nearer the altar. Its walls are rough stone. The floor is packed earth. A shallow niche has been prepared for the coffin. Nothing about it looks royal. That may be the point. The coffin is lowered slowly by ropes. Men brace their boots against the stone. Wood creaks. A rope groans. For one alarming second the coffin tilts. Everyone freezes. Then it steadies. Even royal funerals, you discover, depend heavily upon four men not losing their grip. Once the coffin rests below, the abbot begins the final prayers. Latin murmurs through the chamber. Wax drips across your fingers. You barely notice. Agnes stands beside you. She does not weep. She watches. The servant carrying the tray of roadside offerings descends last. You expect the objects to be placed inside the grave. Instead, the abbot shakes his head. Only 3 are chosen: the small bronze ring from the pilgrim whose wife received royal alms, the fragment of blue glass, and the piece of candle wax from St. Giles. Why these 3, no one explains. The other offerings will remain with the abbey. The old iron key is not among them. You notice immediately. Brother Aldwin notices you noticing. His face gives nothing away. The bronze ring is placed near the foot of the coffin. The abbot scatters a little earth. One of the monks sprinkles holy water. Then the first stone slab is moved into place. Above you, the bells begin again. Some swear that a person buried close to an altar benefits from the prayers spoken there every day. Others believe the sacred space itself offers protection. Even now it is hard to tell how much such ideas belong to theology and how much to the simple fear that death should not be faced alone. Stone settles over the grave. The queen disappears. Not into gold, not beneath marble, not wearing jewels. She goes into darkness with a comb, a prayer book, a pilgrim token, a lock of her daughter's hair, and a handful of memories given by ordinary people along a muddy road. You remain until the final slab is lowered. Then mortar is prepared. The paving will soon hide every sign that the floor was opened. You look toward Brother Aldwin. He has one hand beneath his cloak, around something, perhaps his own key. Perhaps nothing. The abbot finishes the final prayer. The monks begin climbing back toward the candlelit chapel. You follow slowly. At the top of the stairs, dawn has finally begun to lighten the windows, grey first, then pale blue. The queen is beneath the floor now. The court has lost its chance to dress her in magnificence. And yet, one object that should have been part of yesterday's offerings has vanished from sight. The ancient iron key. It has not entered the grave. It has not returned to the tray. And as the bells of St. Edric's carry the news of burial across the frozen fields, you realize that something else is still waiting beneath this abbey. Something the Queen may have intended to leave behind. By noon, the royal household is dispersing. Wagons leave, bedding is counted, and the Queen's rooms are stripped of ceremony. In the sudden quiet, Agnes opens the cupboard that held Adelina's private devotional objects. You follow Agnes upstairs. She moves more slowly today. The rooms already feel colder without the Queen's attendants crowding them. The fur-lined cloak has gone. The leather shoes beneath the stool have gone. The physician's jars have been removed. Only pale rectangles in the dust reveal where boxes once stood. Agnes opens the cupboard where Queen Adelina kept her private devotional objects. She stops. You nearly walk into her. What is it? She does not answer. Instead, she reaches into the cupboard, empty. You remember the little reliquary that hung beside the Queen's bed. A fragment of cloth said to come from St. Edric's cloak. It is gone. Was it packed? Agnes looks behind the cupboard as though a silver reliquary might have developed legs during the night. No, she calls a chamberwoman, then another. Neither has touched it. The household inventory clerk arrives carrying parchment inkhorn and the permanent expression of a man who suspects the entire world exists primarily to make his lists inaccurate. He checks the entry. One small silver reliquary, recorded yesterday, not assigned to the royal treasury, not given away. Not buried with the Queen. Missing. The clerk sighs. That makes 3. You look at him. 3 what? Things that are not where they should be. He turns several pages. The reliquary is 1. The second is a packet of documents from the Queen's private writing desk. You remember the empty spaces in the leather folder. Apparently, several burial instructions, personal letters, and a copy of an old abbey record were kept together after the Queen's death. This morning the folder is found. The papers are not. And the third, the clerk hesitates. Agnes answers for him. A bundle. What kind of bundle? No one knows. That is not reassuring. The bundle was wrapped in undyed linen and tied with black thread. A servant remembers carrying it from the Queen's room after her death. Another remembers seeing it beside the iron-bound chest. No one remembers opening it. No one admits moving it. And now it is gone. Some swear that objects left near a dead person should never be casually handled because they may carry illness, misfortune, or something less easily named. Others believe possessions associated with the dead can become powerful relics of memory. The clergy discourage the more imaginative versions of these beliefs. Servants continue having them anyway. You walk with Agnes to the sacristy. The iron-bound chest remains there. Its wax seal is unbroken. The tray of roadside offerings rests on a table nearby. You count automatically. Wooden bead, spindle whorl, horseshoe nail, pilgrim badges, clay flask, but not the old iron key. Still missing. Brother Aldwin enters. His face tightens when he sees the open inventory. The key, you ask. He shakes his head. Not here. Questioning the servants produces only rain-soaked contradictions. No one admits moving the reliquary, the papers, the linen bundle, or the key. Agnes can say only that Adelina once held the bundle against her chest, and that perhaps the reliquary was never meant to leave St. Edric's. Near sunset, Brother Aldwin finds you beside the cloister. He says only 2 words, "Come below." You follow him through the church, past the Queen's newly sealed grave, down the worn steps toward the ancient crypt door. He carries a lantern in one hand, in the other is the old iron key. The missing one. You stop. Where did you find it? Brother Aldwin looks toward the darkness ahead. I did not. He raises the key. It was left outside my cell. A scrap of parchment had been tied around it. Only 4 words were written there. He shows them to you. The ink is still dark. You read the message twice. She wished it opened. Brother Aldwin turns toward the sealed chamber. The ancient iron plate waits beside the door, and somewhere above you, beneath candle smoke and worn stone, the Queen's reliquary, her private papers, and the mysterious linen bundle remain nowhere to be found. The old iron key does not turn easily. Brother Aldwin presses it into the narrow plate beside the ancient door, and for several breaths nothing happens. The metal grates inside the mechanism. Dust slips from the stone around the frame. Somewhere behind you, water falls steadily into darkness. 1 drop, then another. You hold the lantern closer. Perhaps it does not fit. Brother Aldwin says nothing. He shifts the key slightly and tries again. This time something moves. A deep click travels through the door. You both stand very still. For an object that has spent more than a century being lost, the key appears disturbingly certain of its purpose. But Brother Aldwin does not open the door. Not tonight. He withdraws the key, wraps it in cloth, and tells you the abbot must decide what happens next. The Queen may have wished the chamber opened. The dead, unfortunately, are notoriously poor at clarifying instructions. You climb back toward the church. By the time you emerge, the abbey has entered the quiet hours before dawn. Only a few candles remain lit near the Queen's newly sealed grave. Their flames bend whenever cold air moves through the choir. Brother Aldwin goes to find the abbot. The abbot postpones the opening. After an almost sleepless night, you hear a quill scratching in a cold room beside the chapter house. A scribe is preparing the official account of the burial. Brother Matthew, thin shoulders, narrow face, fingers permanently stained dark around the nails. A knife lies beside his parchment, not a threatening knife, a writing knife. Scribes use such blades to sharpen quills, scrape mistakes from parchment, and occasionally wage quiet war against inconvenient sentences. Brother Matthew is doing exactly that. He bends over a fresh sheet. Scratch. Pause. Scratch. You stop in the doorway. He looks up. You need something warmth. There is none. Fair. The room is almost as cold as the cloister. A charcoal brazier glows weakly beneath the window, producing more optimism than heat. You step inside anyway. The table is crowded with parchment sheets, wax tablets, ink horns, pumice, sealing wax, and several goose feathers prepared as pens. One parchment bears a heading you recognize, the burial record of Queen Adelina. You should probably look away. You do not. The first lines are formal. Her title. The date of death. The abbey. The names of witnesses. The place of burial beneath the inner chapel. Then your eyes reach a sentence near the bottom. Something has been scraped away. The parchment surface is rough and pale where Brother Matthew has used his knife. Beside it lies another sheet, an earlier draft. You read the corresponding line, with certain personal objects according to her final command. On the official copy, Brother Matthew writes instead, with suitable devotion and proper rites. You stare at the words. The meaning has not merely been shortened, it has changed. The objects disappear. The Queen's personal command disappears. Only respectable ceremony remains. Brother Matthew notices where you are looking. He places his hand over the draft. That is unfinished. So is the truth, apparently. His face tightens. Scribes are accustomed to corrections. They are less accustomed to corrections speaking back. You misunderstand, then explain. He glances toward the door. No one stands there. He lowers his voice. The record must be clear. It was clearer before. It was dangerous before. Pressed for the danger hidden in a few truthful words, Brother Matthew admits that the household master ordered the Queen's personal objects removed from the permanent account. He lists them quietly. The prayer book, the pilgrim badge, the wooden comb, and the linen pouch containing hair. You already know all four. Those were in the coffin. Yes. Then why remove them? Because the household master said a queen should not be remembered as a grieving mother with a broken comb. There it is. Not magic. Not murder. Not yet. Something simpler. An image being repaired. The court prefers ceremony. Queens belong in chronicles with crowns, marriages, alliances, estate sons, funerals, and suitably dignified grief. A cheap pilgrim badge does not fit, a worn comb certainly does not, and a mother carrying the hair of her dead daughter into the grave is far too intimate for a polished royal memory. You look again at the altered line. History has changed by less than a dozen words. Brother Matthew reaches for another parchment. This one is worse. It is a copy of the burial instructions. Most of the text remains: the plain oak coffin, no gold, burial at St. Edric's. But one sentence from the original draft has vanished entirely. You read it before he covers the page. Let what has been forgotten remain beside me in remembrance. You feel a chill that has nothing to do with the room. What does that mean? I do not know. Did the Queen write it? Dictated? To whom, Agnes? Who ordered it removed? He does not need to answer, you already know, the household master. No one can quite agree whether medieval scribes deliberately reshape history as often as later generations accuse them of doing. Sometimes they copy faithfully, sometimes they shorten, sometimes they misunderstand damaged texts. Sometimes powerful people tell them exactly what the past is supposed to say. Parchment is expensive. Memory is more expensive still. A sentence omitted once may vanish forever. He resumes scraping the parchment. You turn to leave, listening, as a more convenient version of the past takes shape beneath his knife. Then he calls you back. Brother Matthew calls after you. There is one thing I did not remove. You look back. He reaches beneath a stack of accounts and produces a tiny scrap of parchment. On it is a quick copy of the deleted sentence. Let what has been forgotten remain beside me in remembrance. Why keep it? He looks towards the narrow window, where winter light rests weakly against the glass, because someone should. Then he folds the scrap and slips it inside the binding of an old memorial book, not the official chronicle, not the royal record, a forgotten book filled with names of dead monks, benefactors, widows, children, and pilgrims. The kind of book few powerful men bother reading. The scrap remains hidden in the neglected memorial book, while spoken stories escape into the cloister and begin changing almost at once. Within weeks of Queen Adelina's burial, St. Edric's begins collecting stories almost as quickly as it collects winter mud. You hear the first beneath the choir stalls. A novice whispers that the Queen was buried without her crown, because she feared wearing earthly gold before the judgment of heaven. Another insists there was never any crown because the real one had been stolen. A third claims the Queen ordered every jewel melted down and distributed among widows. None of them mention Agnes. None mention the worn wooden comb. And certainly no one mentions Brother Matthew's altered record. The official account now says only that Queen Adelina was buried with suitable devotion and proper rites, a clean sentence, a safe sentence, a sentence with almost nothing inside it. You sit near the choir after vespers, warming your hands around a cup of weak ale while monks file away in pairs. The Queen, lies beneath the nearby stones. Her grave is already becoming ordinary. People walk above it. Candles drip beside it. Dust settles. A monk kneels close enough that the hem of his habit brushes the slab. Life continues because life is exceptionally good at continuing around the dead. But the ancient chamber beneath the older part of the choir remains closed. Years become generations. The guarded key is lost. The monks who knew Adelina die, and later copies repeat Matthew's safer sentence. War repair, poverty, and weather alter the abbey. Roofs fall, floors rise, passages collapse, and the marker above the Queen's plain grave disappears. Still beneath layers of mortar, Adelina remains beside the older sealed chamber, accompanied by the objects no royal chronicle thought worth naming, until the old floor can no longer hide what lies below. Centuries later, long after the last person who heard Adelina's voice has turned to dust, stone begins cracking once again. This time the people who notice it are not monks, and when they lift the floor they are not looking for a queen. The first stone lifts with surprising ease. For centuries it has lain beneath dust, footsteps, fallen plaster, and the slow weight of St. Edric's changing fortunes. Yet, when the workers slide iron bars beneath its edge, the slab rises almost politely. You stand nearby in the cold remains of the choir. The abbey is no longer the place you remember. Part of the roof has vanished. Ivy presses through broken tracery. Rain has washed pale streaks down walls once darkened by incense. Where monks once filed toward matins, archaeologists now kneel with brushes, notebooks, lamps, measuring rods, and the patient expressions of people who know that an hour of careful scraping can reveal more than a day of enthusiastic digging. They are not searching for Queen Adelina. They are investigating subsidence beneath the old choir. A section of floor has begun sinking, and beneath it surveys reveal several hollow spaces. Most are expected to contain forgotten burials. No one expects royalty. That expectation lasts until the second paving stone is removed. Below it appears a fragment of dressed masonry, then a narrow stair. You know those stairs, or almost know them. Centuries have altered everything. Mortar has fallen. Edges have softened. Yet when damp air rises from below carrying the smell of soil, stone, and enclosed time, you remember descending by candlelight on the morning Adelina was buried. The archaeologists move slowly. Before anyone descends, the opening is photographed from above. A scale bar is laid beside the stair. Each stone receives a number. The position of loose mortar roof fragments, animal disturbance, and later repairs is entered on a plan. A laser scanner records the exposed surface in thousands of measured points, creating a three-dimensional map of a space still hidden beneath debris. This patience is not ceremony. The team records each layer before removing it. Beneath fallen masonry, a blocked medieval doorway takes shape. Rather than break it open, the archaeologists pass a narrow camera through a natural gap in the mortar. At first, the screen shows only dust, a blurred edge. the bright reflection of the camera's own light against a pale stone. Then the lens turns. A rectangular void extends beyond the wall. Part of a coffin lid has collapsed inward. Textile lies near the upper body, darkened until blue, brown, black and grey are difficult to distinguish. Beside it curves a narrow strip of corroded metal. Under the harsh little light, the band appears green at the edges and dull gold at one surviving patch. The first whispered word is crown. The excavation director answers at once. Circlet-shaped object. It is a less exciting phrase. It is also the correct one. Nothing has been cleaned. Nothing has been lifted. No analysis has identified the metal or established whether the object was worn, sewn to a veil, placed later, or moved when the coffin collapsed. But the image escapes the chamber before the caution does. Within hours, someone outside the project describes a royal crown. By evening, a local report mentions jewels, although no jewel has appeared. By the following morning, a headline asks whether a lost queen's treasure has been found beneath the abbey. The archaeologists return to their context sheets. They have seen excitement outrun evidence before. The blocked entrance is opened only after the masonry has been assessed and the deposits sealed behind it have been sampled. Dust is drawn away. Each stone is numbered and lifted onto padding. The final one reveals a chamber just large enough for a coffin and a person to pass beside it. Cold air moves outward, not a supernatural breath, only trapped air responding to a new opening after centuries of stillness. Yet everyone falls silent. The room contains no mountains of gold. No weapon waits across the lid. No painted face looks up from a perfect coffin. There is collapsed oak, pale bone, dark fabric, a metal band and dust resting in layers so delicate that a careless sleeve could erase them. The scene resembles the thumbnail only for a moment. Two figures above an open royal burial, astonishment held between them, blue cloth and crown-like metal, glowing beneath their lamps. Then training takes over. One archaeologist checks the wall. The other begins the first measured drawing. The unexpected discovery will not be understood by staring at it. It must be read patiently, one ordinary object at a time. Modern lamps shine where beeswax flames once trembled. Dust rises. A small section of wall is cleared. Then someone finds carved letters. Only fragments survive. A.D.E. The room changes. People begin speaking more quietly. A historian compares the carving with surviving records. Queen Adelina was buried at St. Edric's. The exact grave was later lost. There has always been uncertainty over whether the old descriptions refer to this part of the church. Now the uncertainty begins narrowing. The excavation continues. A rectangular burial chamber appears beneath collapsed debris. Within it rests the dark remains of an oak coffin. Most of the wood has decayed. Some survives where metal fittings and soil conditions protected it. There is no gilded coffin, no jeweled plate, no royal crown, only the narrow copper-gilt circlet already glimpsed through the camera, still caught in the mineral-darkened threads of a veil. That causes the first surprise. Royal burials of Adelina's period are expected to display status even when religious humility is emphasized. But this coffin seems almost aggressively plain. One archaeologist calls it austere. You remember the carpenter brushing oak dust from his sleeves. The measurements are right. The lid has partly collapsed. Beneath it lie human remains wrapped in traces of textile. Everything happens carefully now. Nothing is pulled free. Nothing is hurried. Soil is removed in thin layers. Every position is recorded. The dead have waited centuries. Another afternoon will not inconvenience them. Near the upper body, a corroded object emerges. At first it looks like nothing more than a dull lump. Cleaning reveals a small metal pilgrim badge, the shape of a saint beneath an arch. You remember Agnes opening a cloth bag. Then another object appears, a wooden comb, one tooth missing. The archaeologist holding it stares at the object longer than you expect. A queen buried with a cheap personal comb instead of royal jewels is peculiar enough. Then they discover the prayer book, or what remains of it. The leather binding has partly survived. Fragments of parchment cling together beneath corrosion and decay. Tiny traces of pigment remain, no jeweled covers, no elaborate royal decoration, only a small devotional book worn by use. The court record mentions none of these things. The surviving official account simply says Adelina receives proper rights. Nothing about humble possessions, nothing about deliberately avoiding royal display. Someone checks later copies of the Chronicle. Same silence. Then comes the little pouch. It lies near the Queen's hands. The linen is almost gone, preserved only in fragments. Inside are strands of hair, not enough to identify by sight. Samples are taken. The archaeologists become cautious. Perhaps the hair belongs to Adelina. Perhaps it entered accidentally. Perhaps it belonged to someone else. Even now it is hard to tell whether every object in an ancient grave was intentionally placed. But you remember Agnes, her daughters. Science will have to arrive there by a slower road. At the foot of the coffin, they discover a small bronze ring. Beside it lies a fragment of blue glass. Neither is valuable. Neither makes sense as royal regalia. Yet both were deliberately positioned. The archaeologists begin wondering whether these are devotional tokens, personal gifts, objects associated with pilgrimage. One suggests they may represent people outside the royal household. You remember the muddy road, the old pilgrim, the man carrying his daughter's broken glass. Memory has survived beneath stone better than the chronicle allowed. Then the examination of the skeleton produces another surprise. Nothing indicates the violent death later legends invented. No dramatic wound, no hidden dagger, no shattered skull. The old stories of assassination begin quietly collapsing. There are signs of age, signs of long illness perhaps. evidence compatible with a woman whose final weeks were marked by weakness rather than sudden violence. No one can quite agree whether any specific disease can be identified from what remains. The bones refuse to provide the convenient mystery that storytellers have spent centuries creating. Instead, they offer something stranger: ordinariness, a sick woman, an aging body, a carefully chosen burial, a queen who appears to have rejected the language of magnificence. Then, while clearing soil beside the coffin, one excavator's brush strikes metal, not gold, iron, a small key. For a breath, you think it is the one from the road. It is not. This key is smaller. Its teeth are different. It lies near a section of wall that does not match the rest of the chamber. The masonry has been inserted after the original construction. Someone shines a lamp across it. Behind several stones is a narrow cavity. Work stops. Photographs are taken. Measurements are repeated. The stones are removed one by one. Inside waits a bundle of objects: a corroded silver reliquary, fragments of folded parchment, and traces of undyed linen tied around something that has almost completely decayed. The missing things: the Queen's reliquary, her papers, the mysterious bundle. They were never stolen. They were hidden beside her grave, not inside it, beside it. The reliquary still contains a tiny piece of ancient cloth. The parchment is fragile, almost beyond handling, but portions of writing survive. One line can eventually be reconstructed, not perfectly, not entirely, but enough. It speaks of remembrance, of someone forgotten beneath St. Edric's. The archaeologists exchange looks, because behind the burial chamber, beyond the inserted masonry, another wall has appeared, older, far older. Its doorway is sealed, and set beside that doorway is a narrow iron plate shaped for a key. You remember Brother Aldwin standing here in lantern light. You remember his warning. You remember the key that had been missing for more than 100 years. The archaeologists have opened Queen Adelina's tomb, expecting perhaps royal jewelry, ceremonial clothing, or evidence supporting generations of dramatic legend. Instead, they find a comb, a pilgrim badge, a daughter's hair, gifts from ordinary people, hidden documents, and a queen whose burial contradicts almost everything later tradition preferred to say about her. But now the strangest clue lies not inside her coffin. It lies in the wall beside her, because Adelina seems to have arranged her own grave beside a chamber older than hers, a chamber containing someone history forgot. And as the lamps shine across that sealed doorway, the Queen's forgotten sentence seems to rise again from beneath centuries of dust. Let what has been forgotten remain beside me in remembrance. The older doorway is opened 3 days later, not with the excitement that later stories will give it. There are no shouted discoveries, no sudden rush of treasure into lamplight, no dramatic curse waiting patiently behind the stones. There is mostly dust, damp air, careful hands, and the quiet scrape of tools against mortar that has not moved for centuries. You stand at the edge of Queen Adelina's burial chamber while the last blocking stone is lifted away. Beyond it lies darkness. A lamp moves forward. Stone walls emerge. Then a low floor. Then the shape of another grave. The forgotten chamber is smaller than anyone expects. There is no treasury, no golden throne, no jeweled crown. Medieval legends have once again demonstrated an unfortunate weakness for exaggerating the furniture. Instead, the archaeologists find the remains of a simple coffin almost entirely consumed by damp. Inside lies the skeleton of an adult woman. Near her shoulder rests a corroded clasp. At her feet are fragments of leather. Beside one hand survives a tiny metal cross. Nothing identifies her immediately. No inscription, no crown, no royal seal. Only a burial placed close to the old sanctuary, in a period when such a position would have been reserved for someone important. The first examinations suggest the grave predates Adelina by generations, perhaps even by the 2 centuries Brother Aldwin once described the lost queen, or someone connected with her. No one can quite agree whether the woman truly is the royal traveller who, according to official chronicles, was carried away from St. Edric's for burial elsewhere. Records are incomplete, dates overlap imperfectly, the bones do not announce a name, but one clue waits near the coffin, a lead plaque, corroded almost smooth. Under careful examination, faint letters emerge. Not enough for certainty, enough for possibility. A woman's name beginning with E and a title that may once have meant queen. Suddenly, Adelina's strange preparations become clearer. She was not searching for treasure. She was searching for a person, a woman erased by a tidy official record, just as Adelina herself would later be tidied by Brother Matthew's pen. You remember her deleted sentence, "Let what has been forgotten remain beside me in remembrance." Perhaps she discovered references to this older burial while reading the abbey's damaged accounts. Perhaps she suspected the official royal chronicle was wrong. Perhaps Agnes knew more than she ever said. Even now it is hard to tell exactly what Adelina understood, but the hidden documents beside her grave provide another piece. One damaged parchment contains names copied from an older memorial list. Most are unreadable. One survives partly. A royal woman, a death at St. Edric's, and a note indicating prayers should continue for her soul. Someone generations later crossed the entry out, not violently, not dramatically, just one line through ink. The forgotten woman vanished from the living record while remaining beneath the floor. You think again of Brother Matthew scraping Adelina's burial record, history repeating itself with a writing knife. The archaeologists begin to understand why Adelina may have chosen this particular grave. She placed herself beside the forgotten woman, not inside the ancient chamber, not disturbing her, beside her. And then she hid evidence in the wall connecting their stories. The missing reliquary turns out to matter too. Its cloth fragment is not from St. Edric's cloak as generations believed. Analysis cannot prove whose cloth it was, but the weave appears considerably older than Adelina's lifetime. Perhaps it came from the earlier grave. Perhaps the abbey had preserved it without remembering its original owner. Some swear Adelina must have discovered the truth. Others argue that she could only have suspected it. The linen bundle offers an even quieter revelation. Within the decayed folds are remnants of plain woven fabric, a small bone sewing needle and several strands of coloured thread. Not royal treasure. Women's work. The sort of objects that chroniclers almost never bother recording. The bundle may have belonged to the unidentified woman. Or perhaps Adelina gathered these things as symbols of ordinary female life. No one knows. The questions do not end when the graves are opened. They become smaller, slower, and more demanding. In the conservation room, the copper-gilt circlet rests beneath a magnifying lens. Its surface is no longer the bright gold imagined in the first reports. Corrosion has lifted much of the gilding. Threads caught around the inner edge confirm that the band was attached to textile, probably the blue veil, rather than worn as a heavy crown. A few plant fibres remain beneath one fold. They may come from stuffing flowers or material that falls into the coffin during preparation. The conservator refuses to choose among those possibilities without stronger evidence. Beside the circlet, the pilgrim badge receives gentler cleaning. A figure beneath an arch becomes visible along with traces of lettering too damaged to read completely. Comparisons with badges from known shrines suggest a broad region, not a precise journey. Adelina may have acquired it herself. It may have been given to her. It may have travelled through several hands before reaching the chapel. Objects have biographies too. They are made, bought, carried, lost, repaired, gifted, blessed, doubted, and remembered. Burial is only the last event we happen to find. The wooden comb presents another quiet puzzle. Microscopic wear along its teeth suggests repeated use. One tooth breaks long before burial. The edge is smooth rather than fresh. Fine debris trapped near the spine includes hair and textile fibers, but contamination across centuries makes simple conclusions dangerous. The comb was not made for the funeral. Someone chose an object already familiar. The strands inside the pouch are examined separately. They belong to a human being, but the tests available cannot create a complete story. Ancient genetic material may be too damaged for a clear relationship. Chemical signatures can reflect diet and movement, though interpretation depends upon preservation and comparison. The hair might support the belief that it came from someone raised in a different region from Adelina. It cannot whisper the word daughter. That word survives only in the fragile meeting place between object document and memory. The Queen's bones offer no dramatic wound and no proof for later tales of assassination. Instead, the strongest evidence remains in placement, wear fabric, and writing in the relationships among small things. The older grave's corroded plaque is examined next. The lead plaque from the older grave receives specialized imaging. Light is directed across it from different angles. Digital models exaggerate tiny changes in the surface. What first appears to be one letter may be a scratch. What seems like decoration may be corrosion. Gradually, several marks separate from the noise, an E, perhaps an L or a broken T, a shortened title whose surviving strokes could be read as a form associated with Queen, though another reading remains possible. The team compares handwriting and letter forms with inscriptions from a period generations before Adelina. The broad date fits. The name does not become whole. The forgotten woman keeps part of herself. The tiny cross beside her hand is made from a base metal alloy. The clasp near her shoulder once fastened cloth of comparatively fine weave. The leather fragments at her feet may belong to shoes. None prove royalty. Position within the old sanctuary suggests status, but status can belong to an abbess patron, noble widow, or royal woman. The records narrow the possibilities without closing them. A damaged memorial list mentions a royal woman dying at St. Edric's. A later chronicle claims that a woman of similar name was carried elsewhere. The crossed-out line in the abbey record could indicate correction, political change, or deliberate erasure. The grave may belong to the lost queen. It may belong to someone whose story overlaps hers. The most responsible conclusion remains provisional. The older burial is an important woman, possibly royal, whose commemoration disappears from the surviving institutional record. That sentence lacks the sparkle of a treasure announcement. It also leaves room for truth. Then the parchment from Adelina's wall is examined under wavelengths of light, invisible to the eye. Faded ink separates from stains. Letters appear where the surface first seemed blank. The surviving lines do not provide a confession or name a murderer. They list prayers, fragments of names, and instructions for keeping remembrance near a grave. One phrase corresponds closely to Brother Matthew's hidden scrap. Let what has been forgotten remain beside me in remembrance. It is not proof that Adelina identified the older woman. It is evidence that she cared about the forgotten burial. That distinction matters. Evidence shows that Adelina's grave is deliberately placed beside the earlier chamber. Evidence shows that objects and papers are concealed in the connecting wall. Evidence shows that her burial display is modest, personal, and unlike the royal treasure imagined by legend. The possibility is that she uses her own grave to restore another woman to memory. Possibility becomes persuasive when many small choices point in the same direction. Still, it remains a possibility. The researchers publish both. On the final evening before the finds leave the abbey for study, the labelled trays are arranged in order. No object looks impressive from across the room. The comb is dark and cracked. The ring is small, the glass is only a fragment, the badge is grey, the circlet is thin green and gold in scattered patches. The sewing needle could disappear beneath one finger. Together, however, they change the shape of the story. The Queen's rank is present, but it is not the centre. At the centre are journeys, grief work, devotion, and the decision to remember someone whose name may never be recovered. The unexpected discovery is not a thing that can be weighed like treasure. It is a relationship between two graves. A queen with a known name chooses to lie beside a woman without one. Centuries later, the first grave opens the path to the second. The remembered dead returns a forgotten dead to history. And strangely, uncertainty feels appropriate, because the unexpected truth in the Queen's tomb is not one spectacular secret. It is a collection of small ones. A queen, remembered as distant and ceremonial, carried her daughter's hair into death. A woman associated with royal wealth rejected jewels for a worn wooden comb. A ruler whose funeral should have advertised power chose gifts from pilgrims, widows, craftsmen, and villagers. A supposedly stolen reliquary was hidden deliberately. A supposedly missing bundle held humble domestic objects, and most importantly, a queen used her own burial to keep another forgotten woman from disappearing completely. The grand mystery turns out to be about memory. Who receives it? Who loses it? Who writes it down? Who quietly changes a sentence? Outside the ruined abbey, rain begins. It falls through broken roof stones and gathers in shallow hollows where monks once walked beneath covered cloisters. You step back toward Adelina's grave. The archaeologists have finished their work for the evening. Objects rest in carefully labelled trays: the wooden comb, the pilgrim badge, the bronze ring, the blue glass. Things once carried through mud and sleet now sit beneath clean lamplight. You remember the people who gave them. The pilgrim whose wife received alms, the old man with his daughter's glass, Agnes standing beside the coffin, Master Odo beside his herbs, Brother Aldwin holding the iron key, Brother Matthew hiding one sentence inside an unwanted book. Even the brown dog seems briefly present again, sleeping too close to the guest house hearth. Nothing survives exactly, but some things survive enough. And now the pace of the world begins to soften. The lamps dim, the voices fade. The tools are set aside. Night settles gently over St. Edric's, over broken walls and winter grass, over old roads disappearing beyond the fields. You no longer hear carts. You no longer hear argument. There is only the memory of bells. A bell before dawn. A bell above a burial. A bell crossing frozen fields while horse breath rises into darkness. You imagine the abbey as it once was, warm candlelight behind shuttered windows, rushes beneath tired feet, smoke resting among rafters, a bowl of pottage near the hearth, wet cloaks drying slowly, outside frost whitening the road, inside someone turning an iron key carefully in an ancient lock, and beneath all of it 2 women sleeping close together beneath stone, one remembered, one forgotten, then remembered again. You do not need to solve every uncertainty tonight. You do not need to decide whether Adelina knew the older woman's exact name, whether the reliquary truly belonged to her, or whether every rumor carried one small grain of truth. The unanswered pieces can remain where they are, quietly. There is something restful in that. The medieval world has never offered perfect records. It gives you worn parchment, broken seals, half-readable names, humble objects, old superstitions, and stories repeated beside fires until certainty becomes soft around the edges. Still, sometimes that is enough. Enough to know that someone cared. Enough to know that someone remembered. Enough to know that beneath the crowns and chronicles people carried grief in small pouches, kept old combs because familiar things mattered, treasured cheap pilgrim badges and feared being forgotten just as deeply as people do now. The last candle burns lower. Wax gathers around its base. Beyond the abbey wall the river moves through darkness exactly as it did when Master Odo threw the mysterious ashes into the water so many winters ago. You hear it faintly. A slow current, a soft wind, perhaps one final bell far away. Then even that disappears. The stones grow still. The graves grow quiet. The muddy roads, the market tolls the pilgrims, the monks, the royal servants, the suspicious keys, and whispered legends all fade into the gentle distance of sleep. And Queen Adelina remains where she chose to remain, beside someone the world almost forgot, surrounded not by gold, but by the small ordinary things that proved she had once loved, grieved, travelled, remembered, and been human. The darkness settles warmly around the old abbey. You pull the wool blanket a little higher. The fire sinks into embers. There is nowhere else you need to go tonight, nothing else you need to uncover. The doors are closed, the bells are silent. And beneath the worn stones every old secret may finally rest. End of script. Sweet dreams.